who wants to work for an a-hole and who wants to go the extra mile for an a-hole? If you express your gratitude when challenges come to you and when you've given grace to others when they face challenges, then I think that helps you with your business and that helps you weather it. And so I'm, as I mentioned earlier, I'm so grateful to my staff and my paralegal, and then also to my friends and family. And I have to say, Steve, one of the lessons learned, it's not easy for me to rely on others. I'm so used to being the person who wants to do it everything on my own, to rely on myself because I know I'll get it done and I'll get it done right. But I realize that I can't, especially after this. Um, it's just not how life works.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hey, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today we're going to intertwine both of those themes with our guest, who has an incredible story of resilience, inspiration, and he's here to help you think about ways of taking what he learned to apply it to your practice, to help you grow your practice, have less stress, and make more money. With that, I want to welcome Adam Cordover to the show. Adam, thanks for being here.
Hey, Steve, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here because you have a great story, but you were very adamant about some things that you want to pass on to your colleagues. But before we get into your recommendations, before we get into your Atticus journey, let's talk a little bit about your practice because you have a very unique practice. You have an incredible niche, and you've done some really cool things professionally that are, I would say that are uncommon. So let's talk about your practice for a second. Talk to me about your practice and briefly your journey to set up this practice.
Yeah, sure. So I have a mostly virtual law firm, and I'll discuss what that means in a little bit. And I focus on collaborative divorce and family law. In fact, I run an exclusively out of court dispute resolution practice. And again, I'll discuss a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I've had a lot of different opportunities in really the last 10 years or so. I'm co-editor and co-author of an American Bar Association book with Forrest Mostyn of building a successful collaborative family law practice, which was published in 2018. I'm the recipient of the inaugural Visionary Award of the Florida Academy of Collaborative Professionals for founding and co-instructing the Leadership Institute of the FACP. I'm also a trainer with the Tampa Bay Collaborative Trainers, where I've had just amazing opportunities to go around the US, Canada, France, and even Israel, teaching judges, general magistrates, attorneys, mental health professionals, and financial professionals, and others how to offer collaborative family law services. And recently, I was a board member of the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals, where it truly was an international organization. I got to work with colleagues from Singapore, Australia, really around the world in helping to promote collaborative practice in what I think is a better way for families to resolve disputes.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. So, I mean, your background, your pedigree is incredible, and you're clearly an innovator and you're an innovative thinker. And you've really done everything you can to try and live your great life in alignment with your great practice. When you think about this, what would be an example of a great client for you? What would you be working with? Because I know some lawyers are like, okay, I understand what collaborative law means. I understand that you've got some pretty impressive international credentials. Give me an example of what a great client would look like for you.
Well, it may be helpful just to step back and briefly explain what collaborative divorce is, and then I'd be happy to explain who would be the best fit, um, if that's all right.
Oh, that sounds perfect. A collaborative divorce sounds like an oxymoron. So I'm like, okay, let's hear this. Right?
It does, but collaborative divorce is actually a very simple concept, and basically it means that each spouse has their own separate attorneys, and the attorneys are there solely for the purpose of reaching an out of court agreement, and that means that there's no time, no energy, no money that goes towards fighting in courts or doing those things that really give divorce the awful reputation that it has and the really challenging experiences that families have had for a long time. This is a better way of doing things, as I mentioned before. And oftentimes we've got experts in recognition that divorce is not as much a legal process that people are going through. People don't care as much about the law. What they care about is, being okay at the end of the day, making sure their kids are okay. So it's oftentimes the emotions, the finances that are the big things in dispute. And so, in recognition of that, will oftentimes have a neutral facilitator, somebody who is licensed as a mental health professional, but they're not doing therapy. They're there to help people focus on the future rather than the fights of the past, to help keep everything moving forward as a team leader, and also when there are kids involved, to help craft a parenting plan based on those kids' developmental needs, not based on some legal precepts or statute. Uh, and then oftentimes there will also be a financial neutral. And the reason why we got this person involved is in so many cases, negotiations stop because there's oftentimes one spouse who knows about the finances, another spouse who does not. And when the spouse who doesn't know about the finances reaches the point where they're expected to make financial decisions, they oftentimes can't. They're facing sort of that classic fight, flight, or freeze response that comes with traumas like divorce. And so this financial professional helps educate them, does so in an efficient way, and also allows for the clients to consider tax, financial planning, and other options which we lawyers may not know much about. So it's a much more holistic solution. Now, Steve, you asked me a question. Who is this best for? And so I think that it's probably especially good for professionals, business owners, executives, doctors, LGBTQ plus families, professional athletes, and really others who place a premium on privacy and self determination and on helping resolve things in a team fashion rather than in an adversarial fashion.
It sounds fascinating because it sounds you really enhance privacy, you enhance control, you find neutral experts to make quick advice and quick decisions because part of the decision making process gets slowed down because the person has to get educated. Like, I understand what these terms mean. I understand what this means. So you have kind of experts there or experts on call to say, okay, here's what this means, here how it impacts you. And they're not in a position of advocacy, they're in a position of education. So I would imagine that any affluent family you would be the first stop for an affluent family who's trying to make things private, make things peaceful as best as possible, and make things quick because everything that you're describing is a pretty effective process. I would imagine, most of the family law lawyers I know have more work than they can stand, and they don't always have more work than they can stand of great cases, but more work than they can stand of you know divorce and disputes. How do you get most of your work?
Um, so great. I get most of my work from either referrals from other attorneys, and this has been such an interesting uh, aspect of it. Most people think of other attorneys as their competitors, when they're in the same field. But when you're a collaborative lawyer, um, you're working with the other lawyer as a teammate, not as a competitor or not as an adversary. So we actually get a lot of our referrals from just other attorneys who've worked with us in the past or whom we've helped train, and we help get through this, um, as best of a process, as best of a way as possible. But also just for people doing searches. So most people don't know how they want to go through divorce. They just have seen how other people go through divorce. They realize I don't want that. You
That
know,
doesn't look good. I just saw what happened over there. I don't want that. That was a car crash, right? I
yeah,
want to not hit that wall.
exactly. And so we're there to let people know that hey, there are alternatives, and this is an alternative that you ought to consider. So people just kind of doing some research on their own, we oftentimes are found. And you mentioned as well, Steve, that this is an effective process, and it truly is. Just in my experience, 80, I'm sorry, 90+% of all of the collaborative divorces that I've been involved in have reached a full resolution. So, what I tell clients is that I can't guarantee that you'll be able to reach an agreement in this process, but hey, chances are if you start it, you're going to complete it with a full agreement.
Yeah, the chances are statistically you'll get something. And the worst case is if you don't reach an agreement, you come out educated in a whole different way about what's going on for your former spouse or what's soon to be your former spouse, and a greater education about the process. So there's probably a no lose situation for most people going through it. Yeah, I think it's well, and I want to make sure the audience understood for a couple of reasons. First is what you've designed is in alignment with your personal values. You really become an international expert in this. Is there a limit to where you can take cases, or can you go anywhere, or are you just stuck in Florida, or where can you go?
So I only have a license in Florida, so I can only take Florida-based cases. But because I have a virtual law firm, I'm able to take cases throughout the state of Florida. Or if there are people who are outside of Florida, but have a case that touches on Florida laws or have property or things like that, I've been involved. I've been actually been involved in a case involving folks from Australia who had cases in or had property in Florida. And similarly, I was a consultant on a prenuptial case that was handled collaboratively, where the family was actually from Eastern Europe, but had properties in New York, Connecticut, Florida, and other places. So I was the Florida consultant on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I think about it, I would probably care less about where you're barred, more about your skill set. So if I'm someone, so like I worked when I was doing estate planning work and business work. I worked with a lot of fluent people, and I could care less where the lawyer was from if they could help my client solve the problem. So I would bring in experts all the time. I'm disappointed I didn't know you back when I was practicing, because you would have been you would have been very, very helpful in my um, on my team. Not necessarily being on my firm, but being part of my collaborative team. I would have probably had you on speed dial for a lot of situations. Good, your skill set's not only good with, I would imagine, family law, but also with business disputes. I probably did 100 dissolutions of businesses, like where two guys started a business or two gals started a business and they got in a dispute. So I was just thinking about it. So I don't get too far into this, because this podcast is about something completely different. It's about how your practice kind of hit a wall, so to speak. So let's set that up. Are you fine doing that with me? Are you okay if we shift the gears? Anything else you want to say about your practice before we talk about what happened?
No, no. Let's go ahead. Let's get into it.
Adam, before we talk about what happened in your practice, a challenge that you face that brought you really to the podcast today, if somebody was to reach out to you, where would they find information on your firm? How would they call you? What would they do?
Yeah. Well, first off, my website's a great resource to discuss collaborative divorce and other options for prenuptial agreements, other agreements, adoptions, and other things. My website is familydiplomacy.com. And I think that the website name and the website and in the firm name, Family Diplomacy, a collaborative law firm, reflects our values and what we hope to do for families. And they're also welcome to give us a call at 813 443 0615.
Perfect. Thank you. I just want you to put it out there because so sometimes in practices, you have a great practice and you're having a great life. And sometimes things go from great to bad. And that's kind of what happened to you, Adam. You were like your practice was humming along, things were beautiful, writing books, international teaching, getting great clients. And then boom, not out of nowhere, but out of the Gulf Coast came a challenge. What happened?
Yeah. Hurricane Helene happened in a couple of words. So I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and Hurricane Helene was coming in September of 2024. And I evacuated me and my dog Kelev. We evacuated to family further inland in Florida. But there was a massive storm surge that came with the hurricane, and ultimately, over 2 feet of water ended up flooding my home. And when I've told people in the past, I get different reactions. I think different people have different things in their mind about well, what that means to have 2 feet of water in your house. I can tell you that my first reaction when I came home and first saw the house is realizing that it wasn't just water. It's not like what you find in your tap that came through the house. This was salt water from the bay. This was sewage water that came from the tanks. This was chemicals that were spread throughout. And so when I first came to my home after the hurricane and opened the door after seeing a water line, across my door, and I opened the door, the water had already drained out, but I was hit by just a wall of smell that I can't even describe. And I could see just my refrigerator had tipped over. All of my belongings were scattered. There was matter everywhere, different types of matter. And at that point, had to really make a decision. You know, was I to try to save as much stuff as possible, or kind of just let it go because of concern about being in that environment for too long and God knows what. And then I started hearing reports about bacterial infections and things that were happening to people. So really, with 2 feet of water, pretty much everything was gone, and I ended up losing about 98% of my possessions, including because I mainly work from home.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like, hey, I've got a problem at home. It's both work and home. And if you've gone through anything with a hurricane like this and you realize it's not clean water, it is water that has picked up everything between you and where it came from, everything from sewage, fertilizer, chemical, any type of debris. You just don't know what's floating around it. And it is foul bacterial gunk. And it is just a giant petri dish of stuff that are, floating around and flowing around. So it's pretty foul. And your home, you're pretty much, home's wrecked. Practice, while it's virtual, is still your office is wrecked. And you're probably at that point in time dealing with, okay, what do I do? And so what was your thinking? What did you do? How did you pivot from here? Because there's probably been a moment where you're like, okay, I'm just shut the door and walk off.
Yeah. So I mean, at first I was in shock, and because when I purchased my house a few years ago, I did a FEMA study, and it was built in the 1960s, but no flooding had ever been reported. I then uh, just sort of found myself entangled in trying to figure out a whole bunch of things at once, navigating FEMA rules, dealing with an insurance claims adjuster who was just overwhelmed and didn't respond to me really for about 2 months. Dealing with an entire neighborhood that ended up looking like a giant debris dump, and it's incredible, kind of going outside and seeing every house in your neighborhood impacted. And then one of the first things that they do is remediation comes in, and they just tear everything out, drywall, counters, everything, and then just placed it in the yards, and seeing the entire neighborhood like that for about 2 months before the city came and collected, and just sort of seeing that, um, not because so many people were impacted. I think I saw a statistic about 16,000 homes were at least temporarily uninhabitable. That means you really couldn't find any temporary housing or other things in St. Pete. So actually, right now I'm in Lakeland, Florida, which is depending on traffic about an hour and a half, 2 hours from my house. And then of course all of these people try to come in, and it's common for there to be scams and other things in the event of a disaster. And when everybody is overwhelmed, like everybody was, you just have to be really, really vigilant about not being scammed. So I was kind of dealing with all of this stuff that was going on, and I thank God for my paralegal, who was very understanding and helped keep the firm going. Jennifer Gunnan, who's anybody who's ever worked with her, she is the most empathetic person you could ever know, and she helped move keep things going. My family, who helped me and are still helping me in so many different ways, and ultimately Atticus as well. And one of the things after all this was going is I really didn't know what the future held. I knew that I would have a lot of expenses going forward. I mean, I did have insurance that would cover most of the stuff, but not everything, and unfortunately, not content. Um, and so I called up Denise at Atticus, and mentioned that I'd probably have to put my membership on pause just because I didn't know, just for the next few months. I didn't know what would happen, and I found Atticus to be so supportive, and not only the understanding, but they even said, "Hey, Adam, don't worry about it. We'll put things on pause. Don't worry. And by the way, here are tickets because we don't want you to miss the summit." And I guess I'll talk about that in a little bit about how that helped me really get organized and put everything together.
So you were with Atticus before the hurricane hit. What program were you in? Do you recall?
Yeah. So I joined Atticus in December of 2023. So I've been in Atticus for about a little less than a year before it hit. And I am part of the practice group program. Mark Metzger is the leader of the program, and Michelle Green is the practice advisor.
Gotcha. So that's perfect. So you're in the practice growth program. You're doing the program. You're in it for about a year. What brought you to Atticus? What was the challenge that you were facing before you joined Atticus? What brought you there?
Yeah, so I think that I'm pretty good at what I do, but I came to realize I didn't go to business school. I didn't know much about KPIs, key oh gosh, uh, key
Key performance indicators,
key
KPI.
performance
Yep.
indicators. Yeah. Thank you for the assist, Steve. And also at the same time, I found myself just so working on administrative things, and just constantly focusing on what's going, on client work, without focusing on growing my practice. And I felt like I needed help. The funny thing is that I have a fellow lawyer in my community by the name of Kai Koch, who years ago said to me, "Adam, you need to look into Atticus. I think they could really help you out." And he's somebody I really respect, but I was very, very busy at the time, just doing work and focus on. And I came to the point in December of 2023 where things were slowing down. I had a little bit more time to breathe, and I realized, what, things aren't growing as fast as I want them to. I want the skills to be able to make it happen. So I contacted Atticus. So I started doing some things based on my work with Atticus that really started helping my practice. And would it be helpful, Steve, for me to talk about some of those things?
Yeah, Adam, the one thing that a lot of our lawyers want to know is they want to know ways from you how it helped you make more money and grow. So if you can give me like 3 ways that the program helped you either become more focused or be more profitable, what did the program do? And then we'll talk about what you did after the hurricane with some of the tools and strategies, if that's okay. So I want people to understand there was a foundation, and then from the foundation, you took what you learned after the hurricane and you jumped to another level. And that's really what I want to focus on. So if you could just give me 3 things when you joined the Practice Growth Program, what were 3 things that you implemented that made a difference?
Sure. So first off, there's a philosophy in Atticus that you really need to take a step back in order to take several steps forward. And I took that to heart. And so I ended up going to the quarterly in-person meetings in Orlando. And Atticus tells us ahead of time, let your staff know you're not available. This is just to focus on the business. And I did that. And so just taking those 2 days off per quarter um, gets you thinking about your business, focusing solely on building the great practice and aspects of the great life as well. And so that just gives you the opportunity to take the step back and figure out what isn't working and what changes can be made. And then based on advice from Atticus, I took that a step further. And so now every week I have a 3 hour block where it's on my calendar. It's Tuesday from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. My staff knows not to contact me, that I'm thinking about the business, and it gives me the opportunity to work on the business, think about challenges, and implement changes. And I found that just doing this, everything that I've done since then that helped me prepare for the hurricane flowed from this.
So let me make sure I got this straight, because somebody who's trying to figure out how to grow their practice right now or make some more money may want to apply these 2 strategies. The first strategy is when you went to the workshop is that you protected your focus for 2 days. And this is where people get confused. The workshop is a hyper focused time period for you to focus on your practice in your life. It's not like a CLE. You're really trying to have this little envelope and bubble of focus, time to think. And then what you did, which is very brilliant, and I want people to understand it, is that you put a kind of a work on the life business segment on your time template, your weekly focus. And you spent 3 hours a week where it was protected focus time. Once again, protected focus time, where you focused on challenges, you did some thinking, and you really figured out, okay, how do I move certain things forward? Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. I think that's an absolute perfect assessment. And let me give you an example about some of the issues that I thought about in what I did. So, for example, I found myself scrambling every payroll cycle, and it's because I was invoicing at sort of irregular periods. And so one of the simplest things that I did and ultimately implemented is invoicing on on the off weeks of my payroll cycle. So I get my staff gets paid every 2 weeks. On the off weeks, that's when I do the invoicing. And since then, I haven't since I implemented that quite a few months ago now. I have not had to worry about whether I'll have enough money, for payroll. That it just flows one thing into the other. And that simple thing took such a burden off of me. And again, it just was the time that I took to think about the problem and a solution for the problem, and then doing the steps during that 3 hour time to implement the changes to fix the problem.
Hi, it's Steve. Sorry to interrupt this episode, but if you're new to Atticus and you're listening to our podcast and you don't understand how Practice Advisor works, if you're curious on how to work with a Practice Advisor, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, and I'm going to give you a complimentary, no-charge practice growth diagnostic. So you can talk to one of our membership directors about how to work with a Practice Advisor. that if you've never had the opportunity to work one-on-one with one of our top flight practice advisors, I'm going to encourage you, as you listen to this episode, ask yourself, would somebody like this be able to help me and help me grow my practice and help me cultivate a great life? With that, thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. It's great because you're eliminating the time you're spending worrying about the problem previously. Now you've refocused the time. As you're listening to this, if you're an audience member, I'm going to encourage you. This is one of the things I've said over the years, and you'll hear what Adam's saying, is there's a big difference between doing tasks for cash and taking time for strategy, for focus. So what Adam did was he said, okay, I'm committing at least 2 days a quarter for focused on strategy, how to grow, how to make more money. Then he took the same concept and applied it weekly for 3 hours minimum a week on how to take the same strategy. This is where people have this dilemma, which is, okay, I'm going to work on the business, which is strategy for growth, and I'm going to give up tasks for cash, especially if you're in an hourly rate shop. So you really, at first, it's scary, but over a period of time, you start to see what Adam did, which is, okay, once I took a step back, looked at what my problem was, I solved the system, I solved the problem, freed me up, reduced my stress, and then allowed me to reinvest my focus and my energy in a higher level strategy, a higher level growth approach. So I just want to take a moment to explain that for anyone who's listening, because it's a little bit more sophisticated than I just did this and this. There's a whole thinking, a whole mindset, a whole focus around it. Give me one more thing that you did, and then let's talk about how you use certain strategies and tools after the hurricane to rebuild your practice and rebuild your life. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. So one of the other things that I did, and it seems so simple, and I don't know why I didn't do it before. But I created an emergency fund for the first time for my business, and doing something like that. Well, first off, it turned out I would need it, so I'm happy that I did that. But even before then, it gave me the confidence to invest in my practice in ways that I didn't feel like I could before. So it allowed me to be comfortable with when my firm needed expanding, to contact building my great team from Atticus, so that they can help me hire a virtual assistant and marketing assistant for my practice, to hire consultants for marketing and operations to streamline things, to doing the things that will help grow my practice and help me and the folks in my firm make more money.
That's perfect. So when you started the emergency fund, which you ironically ended up needing, which is great, right? You're like, okay, that's exactly why I created the fund. Did you do it by a percentage of revenue? Did you say, okay, for every check I bring in, kind of the Mike Michalowicz, our friend Mike Michalowicz's, profit first strategy? Or did you just say, okay, my goal is to put X amount of money aside? How did you do it?
Yeah, so that was I think actually the inspiration, the for profit the Profit First book by Mike Michalowicz. Um, I think that also helped me think about it. I think initially what I did was create a fund just to cover me for a certain period of time, and then after that, add every time I got paid a certain percentage to that emergency fund, but also create some sub accounts for my paralegal's bonus structure, so that I don't have to get scramble for that. So yes, these things kind of all work together, and I think with Atticus, it just, because it gets you thinking about your practice. It You want to look at a bunch of different resources like Profit First, like all of these other books and resources, like your podcast, and figure out, well, these are things that I can implement and really need to implement in my practice.
That's perfect. At certain points in time in the growth of your practice, certain tools will give greater leverage quicker. And so where you were at was perfect timing. Are you okay if we pivot to what you did after the hurricane? Because I think everybody's kind of curious, like, okay, so what's this have to do? You get your practices, your home slammed. You move from hour and a half away to Lakeland, which is clearly off the coast. and you're trying to rebuild. What was the first strategy you used to rebuild? What did you do? If you were to say, hey, look, if there's one piece of advice I can give you that I learned out of recovering from the hurricane, in addition to taking the advice of having a war chest or an emergency fund, this was the biggest thing I learned.
So I um, I was really overwhelmed, um, and um, and I wasn't sure where to start. And I know that you and others in Atticus have been a big advocate of the My Great Planner book, which essentially allows you to plan each day. And and I've heard that and maybe looked at it every once in a while and used it, but I really never implemented it prior to the storm. But I realized my mind was just racing in a million different directions. I was facing these challenges, and I realized I needed to start somewhere. And I think I was actually listening to something which again brought up the My Great Planner book, and I thought to myself, let's just try it. Um, and what it allowed me to do, and what I started doing, is building the habit. The first thing that I did every day was write down what I wanted to accomplish. Um, and
Adam, I'll interrupt you just for a
yeah,
second because I want to set context for people that are audience members. One of the things that we recommend to our members, Atticus members, is to use a focusing system that we call My Great Life. Now, sometimes we call it the My Great Life Planner, sometimes we call it the My Great Life Focus, but it basically is a system we designed about 20 years ago, 25 years ago, but we give to our members that integrates about 20 coaching concepts that we teach our members. Everything from the cash flow focuser to the central question that really we ask all of our members. And you can hear Adam and I tossing it around today is, what does a great life look like to you? What does a great practice look like to you? Not more efficient, not more focused, not more profitable, which could be under those things. But the central core question is, what does a great life look like to you? And so as Adam comes out of the hurricane, he's coming out of a fog, he's overwhelmed. This is one of the reasons we recommend people develop the habit. And you're saying it perfectly, Adam, the habit of using the planner, because it develops the ability to focus your thinking. It becomes a habit. You say, okay, what's a great day look like to me? You dump everything out of your brain. So you're not enhancing anxiety by causing more things running around. And then you use a classic Peter Drucker from the Effective Executives book 40 years ago and say, what are the three most important things? Now we morph that question to, what are the three most important things that would make it a great day for you? So I just want to set the context for that, because people would, if they don't know what you're talking about, they're going to be totally confused. Like, what are you talking about? And it's a written planner. And we've had people tell us, well, you should make it digital. There are some digital copies floating around, but I usually recommend you start at first handwritten, because there's so many studies that show how handwriting makes a greater impact to your brain, to your prefrontal cortex. So that's how come I want to spend a moment and talk about that. So go ahead, Adam. I'm sorry. I just want to set the stage so as you talk about what you did, it would make sense to everybody.
No, I appreciate you explaining that, and I've got the written book in front of me, and quite frankly, I'm one of those people who I'm a faster typist than I am a handwriter. I've always been told I should be a doctor based on my handwriting. I can barely read it, but I have found that it is helpful just to get out of my mind, to get away from the screen for a moment, and to write things down. And so, maybe when
Well,
I first
Adam,
joined.
I'm going to interrupt you again. I'm sorry. I want you guys to listen to what he said. One of the reasons it is a paper planner, an analog planner, is to get you away from the screen. Because if you're in front of the screen, between your email messaging system, if it's something like Outlook, between Slack, between Teams, between just the stuff that's happening electronically, I think some days I have three screens open in front of me, depending on what I'm doing, what I'm working on. The ability to distract you is massive. And what you're fighting for in that moment what you're fighting for is the most valuable thing you own, which is your attention. And what you're fighting for is for one moment, an attention away from what everyone else is trying to get you to do. Someone's trying to delegate you something via email, an opposing counsel's trying to upset you, a client's got this, somebody needs that, someone needs that. And you have to make a decision who you're working for, yourself or them. And you have to take a step back and go, okay, for this one moment, for this 5 minutes, for this 15 minutes, I'm going to own my attention, protect my focus, fully engage my brain, and ask myself, what would a great day look like to me? So I just want to take that apart because it is a core central theme here. If you do this electronically, that's great, but don't get confused with effectiveness and efficiency. If you're going to electronics, you might be efficient, like you might get more, it may look like you're doing a lot more, but you may not be as effective and being as impactful. So I just want, sorry, obviously I'm involved with the team that does the planner. So this is a matter of debate and discussion. So I apologize for the interruption, but at the same time, what you're saying is important. You're stepping away from the screens, taking a moment, protecting your attention, protecting your focus. Boom. All right, Adam, go. Sorry.
No, no, thank you for that. I totally agree. And by the way, I didn't agree before all of this, but now I realize the benefit of it of just taking the
Why didn't
time.
you agree? Why didn't you agree? What was your opposition?
So, as I mentioned, I type a whole lot faster than I write, and I'm used to having computer screens, and I just find I do find my typing a lot more efficient than when I write things down, and I know I'll be able to read them after I type them, and I think I'll probably be able to read them after I write them. But sometimes it can be hairy. But now I've come to realize, okay, I maybe if I write a little bit slower, I can read my handwriting a bit better, and when I write a little bit slower, I can think about what I'm writing a little bit more. And so it just gives me the time and space to figure out what I want to do that
There's a theme here, isn't there?
day. Yeah.
Slow down to speed up. Slow down. Get your thinking together. You have a few moments. Make good decisions. Think about those decisions. Why are those the right decisions for me today? Why are these the most important things for me to do today? And slowing down my handwriting is a reflection of you being reflective. So I just what you're talking about is critical, and what you're doing coming out of the hurricane is profound. So if there's someone who's listening, I want them to understand what the transformation was, what you did, and how you shifted your thinking. But at the same time, I don't want them to have to go through a hurricane to learn this lesson, right? So, or a tragedy to go through this lesson. So I'm sorry, Adam. Keep going. Sorry about.
Yeah. So these days, I use the planner for, identifying specific tasks on a client file I want to do, or of something marketing I want to do, or something like that. But right after the hurricane, I had to get much more basic than that. I have a page that I started using, and task was get fuel for my car, because that was challenging at the time, so there was that. um, Make myself a meal. After the hurricane, I was eating out for every meal, and so my diet, just was not great, and I just wanted to get back to clean eating and just become healthier. So it's those, and then write to my insurance company about X, Y, or Z. It's just doing those things that I found myself so just overwhelmed, and my brain was firing in all different directions. I just needed to take that moment to write down those simple things so I could then accomplish it and feel like I accomplished it after writing it down and ultimately checking it off for the day.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So, as you're listening to Adam wrestle with this, you have to go through a period of intense overwhelm to really appreciate, okay, I have to think through what are the most important things I'll do. As you talk about this, Adam, I'm also going to put in the show notes a link to a podcast I did with Michelle Fuller, who went through a terrible financial quarter and used the My Great Life Focus, our planner, to have the most productive quarter financially of her career. So I'm also going to put a show note in the show notes, a link to her episode. So if you're curious, you want to do a deeper dive on how Michelle used the planner to really improve her life financially, it's there. So anything else you want to say about the planner before I ask you a couple other questions?
No, I think that's it for the planner.
Okay, great. So if you're a member, you get the planner included in your subscription. So if you're in the Practice Growth Program, the Great Practice, Great Life Journey program, if you're in one of the group programs, you should be getting a planner. Now, what usually happens if you don't use the planner, they quit giving it to you. We figure this out. But if you aren't using the planner, I'm going to encourage you to try it in your membership portal. There's a class that we set up a couple of years ago on how to use the planner. So I'm going to encourage you to, if you haven't done that, check that out. If you have a member advisor or practice advisor, a coach, if you're doing one-on-one coaching, talk to them about how to use it. My experience is that just what Adam's talking about, both in my personal life and coaching people, the people that take the time, here's the key element, they take the time to think, even if 5 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, or 30 minutes a week, to think about what they need to do from a strategic level, not a task level. Those are the people that grow the quickest, make the most money, and are most impactful over time. But it's an investment into a habit, it's an investment into a way of thinking, it's an investment into a way of journaling. Because of the core design of the My Great Life Planner is a question, and that question is a prompt. And if you take the time to spend a minute with it or 2 minutes, it's asking you a question. What does a great life look like to you, or what's a great day look like? So it gives you a moment to kind of like doing a brief journaling exercise, a brief prompt exercise. So there's a lot of thought and design that went into it. So if I'll put some more information in the show notes about if you're a audience member, not a member of Atticus, we'll put there's a subscription for it. I have no idea how it works. I'll put a link in there for you if you want to check out the subscription.
But by the way, Steve, one additional thing on the planner actually is one unexpected outcome is it's made my weekends more productive. Because there are also places for you to list what are the things that you want to do on the weekends. But also there's a section, what is this weekend's relaxation or rejuvenation activity? And so it's forced me to think about, okay, what are the things that I want to do this weekend that really are just for me, to be able to chill out and
It's a great
make
question, right? Like, okay, Adam, you're getting ready to have a weekend. What are the three things that will make it a fun, relaxing weekend for you? At least you may not care about that, but at least the planner cares about you. You're like, let's do that. So the inside of that is a lot of thought, a lot of questions. The team that was involved with that and the redesign of that have con- continued to contribute development of that. So fantastic. So other lessons learned. What else did you learn coming out of the hurricane that you would say, hey, look, if you're trying to make more money, be more effective, grow a great practice, what are other lessons that you learned, Adam, that you'd pass on to people?
Sure. So we talked about taking the time to work on the business rather than in the business. Um, Another lesson was taking one step at a time to avoid being overwhelmed, which goes along with what we've been talking about. Um, but also um, taking the time to utilize the resources available to you to learn and to grow. And let me give you an example. So I went to the Atticus Summit in I believe last month or the month before, and I heard Mark Powers talk, one of the founders of Atticus, and he described health issues that he had been facing and how he had used the tools of Atticus to basically say these are the steps that I need to take to help me get through this challenging time. And fortunately, I understand that he's He's past the main stuff, but I found that to be so inspiring, that and I think that helped me even better use the planner and the other tools available to me. Again, not just to focus on my practice, but on working in life and managing through life.
That's perfect. So Adam being delicate about it, and Mark, Mark had developed throat cancer, and he had went through chemotherapy and radiation treatment for throat cancer, and then the cancer they thought he'd beat throat cancer, then it moved to his hip, and then he went through therapy again, and now he's cancer free. But at the summit, he spoke for the first time, I think, in a year and a half publicly, and he talked about two techniques that he used. So we're going to pass those on to you. One is he talked about a technique where he called it My Great Recovery. And he took one of the tools that we've created and just called it My Great Recovery and said that he was going to plan for his recovery. So he actually took and planned out what his recovery would look like prior, when he got diagnosed. So he's like, I'm coming out of this. Here's what my recovery is going to look for. And one of the things that we try and encourage everybody to do is to adopt a gratitude practice. Now, those of you that are worried about making more money and say, what does it have to do with making more money? You'll just have to be patient for a second. I'll try and connect the dots on it. The gratitude practice Mark practiced during this time period was and I try to get him on the podcast to talk about it, and he feels like it's too narcissistic. He doesn't want to talk too much about himself, but I'll talk about it. He developed a gratitude plan. And so for everyone that he interacted with, from where he got his chemo to his oncologist, he practiced gratitude with sending flowers, thank you notes, gifts. And he really worked hard at expressing his gratitude. So much so, and I hopefully, we will get him on a podcast, so much so that he wrote the parents of his oncologist and thanked them for helping their son go through medical school because their son saved his life. And he sent them a gift certificate to a vegetarian restaurant that he found out was their favorite. What do you think these parents did? This is the first time they ever got a thank you note from one of their son's patients with a gift certificate. What do you think these parents did when they got this massive piece of gratitude? This letter, this note, this gift certificate. They picked up the phone and they called their son and said, you better save this man's life. So when you think about gratitude as a strategy for growth, how many referrals can you tolerate if you're being grateful to people for those referrals? A lot of lawyers are so insular in their thinking. They're like, well, people send me work because I'm so amazing. I'm such a great lawyer. I'm just incredible. And I'm going to tell you this and I'll move on. I used to send a lot of work to a family law lawyer in Tampa when I was practicing. And, I'm tracking, like everybody does at the end of the year, I'm tracking work. And I probably sent her $150,000 in fees that year, like cases. And I called her and I said, hey, I noticed that I'd sent you all these cases, but you never sent me anything back. And she goes, oh, I sent everything to my uncle, who's a lawyer, an estate planning lawyer. I'm like, well, okay, thanks. That's great. And then, I got off the phone with her and never sent her another referral again because it didn't make any sense. She's not referring anything back. And then she calls me 6 months later. I noticed I'm not getting any cases from you. And I said, well, it's because you sent everything to your uncle. And her response was, yeah, but I'm really good. Like, you don't understand how good I am. Like, I'm certified in this and certified in that. I'm like, it means nothing to me. It means nothing to me. We don't have a collaborative relationship. You're not referring work to me. And you just want me to refer work to you because you're so good. And I never got a thank you note from her. I never got a bottle of scotch. I got nothing from her. And the zero gratitude and total entitlement based on how smart she was. So if you're looking to make money as a lawyer, one of the biggest things that you want to start is maybe expressing gratitude to the other people that send you business. I don't care if it's simple as thank you note. So anyhow, I agree with you. Mark expressed he was doing a remarkable walking the talk. It's one of our values in the company, is doing a remarkable walking the talk.
On that gratitude, Steve, because I think that was certainly one of the lessons I learned, and I think it's not just important for referral sources, but for for the staff and really who wants to work for an a-hole and who wants to go the extra mile for an a-hole. If you express your gratitude when challenges come to you and when you've given grace to others when they face challenges, then I think that helps you with your business and that helps you weather it. And so I'm as I mentioned earlier, I'm so grateful to my staff and my paralegal, and then also to my friends and family. And I have to say, Steve, one of the lessons learned, it's not easy for me to rely on others. I'm so used to being the person who wants to do it everything on my own, to rely on myself because I know I'll get it done and I'll get it done right. But I realize that I can't, especially after this. Um, it's just not how life works. You have to rely on other people. And I have to, that's probably been one of the biggest challenges for me is kind of letting go and saying, okay, I don't have to be the particular person to meet the FEMA inspector 2 hours away from my house. I've got family who's willing to do that, and friends who are willing to do that. Or there might be a meeting that I don't necessarily have to be at, but in fact, we're not going to be talking about substantive stuff. My paralegal can sub in for me, and do that. So that has also been a big lesson, and I think it stems from gratitude. I think other people's willingness to be there, um, and so that you can rely on them.
So let's go ahead and start to wrap up. Before we do that, though, where's your practice at today? I mean, are your revenues plummeting because of the hurricane? Are you, it doesn't sound like you're spiraling out of control. It sounds like, if anything, you're more focused and productive than you've ever been in your life, despite what's happened. How's the practice? How's life?
Yeah. So first off, on the practice front, so things were kind of slow and on hold, and just for perspective, we're about 3 months out from the hurricane at this point. But even with those challenges, my firm's revenue is going to be up somewhere in the range of 20-25% or so this year over year. So
Good
um,
work. That's
yeah.
good work.
So plus, the practice wise, things are getting back to normal. I think in part because I now earlier I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen to my house, whether I had to learn about a FEMA 50% rule and other things, and so I didn't know whether I would have to knock down my house and rebuild, or have my house physically lifted up. Either of those options would have ended up costing me hundreds of thousands of extra dollars that wasn't covered by insurance, and be a year or longer. At this point, I'm still in Lakeland, but I've come to the conclusion that I can rebuild the home as it is. I can rebuild the home, and which means that it will take a few months rather than a year or longer, and that once that came into focus, and this has really only been in the last couple months or so that I came to realize this, I can start paying a lot more attention to what's going on with work and moving things forward. So I've set the table for future growth, for the expansion that I had planned prior to the hurricane, and for changes that I put on pause since the hurricane. So I'm pretty optimistic about what's to come, Steve.
It sounds like it. So let's summarize with, what are the three big tips that you would recommend to lawyers to safeguard their practices from unexpected disasters?
Hmm. So first off, block off substantial, uninterrupted time on a regular basis to think about your business and implement improvements. So, as I mentioned, I discussed mine, but whatever works for you, whatever works on your schedule, just take that time. Number two, create an emergency fund, because as it turns out, emergencies happen. But even if they don't happen, it will give you the confidence to be able to invest in your practice. So that's number two. And number three is, and we didn't discuss this much, but to create standard operating procedures and instill agency and independence in your staff so that those times where you're unavailable, whether from a planned vacation or because of emergency, that your firm can continue to run.
Adam, as we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to say to encourage your brothers and sisters of the bar to take their game up to the next level, to make more money, to have a great life? Any other advice that you have for them?
Yeah. So kind of going back to my practice, I I don't litigate. I haven't litigated since 2015. I have so many other family law attorneys, especially, say to me, "Well, I'd love to do what you do, but I'm just afraid that I can't. I won't make any money." And I'm here to kind of hopefully show as a model that yes, you can. And in fact, I make more money now than I ever did as a litigator. And so figure out the things that are important to you. Be the master of your own practice, and you can do
Sounds like a battle cry for great practice, great life, if I've ever heard it. Adam,
it.
it really did. It really did. It did. So, Adam, thanks. Thanks for the authenticity. Thanks for sharing the ugly side of what the hurricane had done for you, or did to you, I guess. But really, congratulations on the brilliant work that you did, because the resilience that you showed, the work that you did in your group program, the requesting of help from people, uh, really shows what I like to see in life. Someone who's willing to take a risk, someone who's willing to improve, someone who's willing to learn, someone who's willing to dust themselves off, or in this case, dry themselves off and get back in it. And in your case, it was a brutal time period, but you're coming out with a more profitable law firm, better thinking, really a more reflective attitude about life. Sounds like better relationships. So while it was a tragic thing that happened, the outcome has been really incredibly transformative. So thanks for the time. Thanks for sharing. And as always, thank you for being here and being part of our community.
And Steve, just if I may, again, folks can find me at familydiplomacy.com. But let me also make sure that I share my gratitude for you and for Atticus. I'm an avid listener of the Great Practice, Great Life podcast. Especially big fan of the episodes with Mark Metzger and Victor Medina. I think you all are a great bunch together. So thank you for your inspiration. Thank you for your help. And I just want to let you know I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Now, once Victor and Metzger hear this, I'm going to have to get back on the podcast. You realize that's just going to create more work for me, man. Oh, goodness. Those are great guys. They're great guys, brilliant guys. And thank you. Well done. Very well done. Thank you. Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode could help. With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.